Hello, everyone. Today we have Andy DeSantis back on the podcast. For everyone that knows, we had him on 3 years ago. So
Crazy.
naturally, it was about time we had him back on. But today we're going to be talking about soy. And for those of you that don't know, Andy is a private practice dietitian, blogger, and author from Toronto, Canada. He graduated from the University of Toronto School of Public Health in 2014 with both dietitian accreditation and a master's degree in public health nutrition.
Andy started his career in the research and education department at the Canadian Diabetes Association before pursuing a blogging and social media driven career in private practice and authorship. When he isn't speaking to clients individually or educating the masses with his content, he always appreciates infusing nutrition with a touch of humor via the Instagram at Andy the RD. We're talking about soy today, like Emily said, talking all about its controversies. Andy is a genius when it comes to soy, as well as kale. If you know, you know. Hope you guys enjoyed this one. Andy, welcome back to the podcast.
Thanks so much for having me again. I'm very excited to be here, and appreciate you both. I'm glad you're still doing it.
Yes. For everyone that doesn't know, we had Andy on a couple of years ago where he was talking about like blogging and social media. And today we're taking a complete 180 and we're going to be talking about soy. But anyone that knows Andy's social media presence has probably seen at least one post, I feel like, about soy.
Soy and kale.
Yeah.
100%. And funny enough, it's not a complete 180 because actually today I actually wrote a new blog post on soy just because I was feeling it, because I knew that it was going to be coming up, and I've talked about it for years for various reasons. I know I'll articulate that, but how I talk about, how I think about it's definitely evolved. So I'm sure that'll come out in today's conversation.
Well, we're so excited to get into it, but before we get into soy and all of that, let the people know what your day-to-day life looks like now. I feel like it's probably changed since we've talked to you. Past education, hobbies, whatever you would like to share.
Yeah, for sure. Well, I'm a private practice dietitian. I have been like almost 10 years now, which is pretty wild to say. I know we were talking about how time goes quick. And a lot of stuff is similar, seeing my clients, just charging them more than I used to, doing more writing as I've always done. Biggest thing that's changed, I kind of created an online course and community for fatty liver disease, and that's something I'm really growing. And soy has a role to play in that, which I'm sure we'll talk about. And then nutrition is my one love. My other love, which I think you guys both know, is soccer. So I play soccer, I watch soccer. I went to multiple games in Europe this summer, so like that would definitely fill the hobbies category. And and I'm still doing my thing on social media. And I think since last time we spoke, I was on TV a few times. It's like random flex, that's fun. But yeah, that's it really. Otherwise, all the same.
That's awesome. You deserve to flex those muscles. Those are impressive things worth mentioning. Well, let's talk about soy. I'm sure our listeners have heard, I feel like soy and eggs are like always in the media. Like one day they're good, the next day they're not. So we're here today to debunk a lot of these claims about soy. But let's first start off with like, what are some common foods that our listeners might be eating that contain soy in them?
Yeah, I think realistically, if you're thinking about like the day-to-day diet and using soy for part of meals or snacks or dishes, it's probably going to be soy milk, tofu, tempeh, edamame, maybe some sort of soy protein in a different form, like even a soy protein as a powder. But if you think about like day-to-day use, I mean, there are other forms for sure, miso and natto and so on, but those are probably going to be the most commonly used forms. And then of course there are vegan centric meat products which are made with soy protein. Not all of them, some of them are, depending on the market. So those will be the big players as far as I think most people are concerned.
I saw a YouTube video yesterday where someone was having soy chorizo, which sounded really good.
Yeah, there are actually a lot of there's a really popular, I believe it's a Canadian company called Eve's, and they make a what they call a ground round, and it's like to replicate ground beef. And they have an Italian version, which is like supposed to be used in I guess pasta sauce, and they have like a Mexican version, which is more for like I guess like taco type dishes, but it's just ground up tofu essentially.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Nice.
It's also important for everyone to know, by the way, just I'll say it's like I am, I'm just like an omnivore, so I'm not like an exclusive soy. Like I eat soy. I'm not like I don't have a personal agenda beyond you know, some my values, which will come out again in today's conversation as to why I enjoy talking about it. So
This episode is not sponsored by Big Soy. We'll make that very clear.
Amazing. Why do you, so like soy is in so many things. I feel like people really think it's only like soybeans and they don't really think how many products use soybeans.
Mhm.
So like since it's so common, why do you think it's my brain is not
Words.
working. Why do you think it's demonized so much, even though it is like so prevalent, even if people don't realize it?
Yeah, I mean it's a tough question to answer. I mean, you know, why, I guess you have to ask then, why do people want to make anti-soy content? You know, a lot of people who make strong food avoidance content, I mean, let's be honest, I mean, they do it for their own personal interests, right? For their own personal gain, because, you know, the nature of social media, and it's now more so than ever, right? You get clout by, you know, putting things down, or by telling people that they have to avoid this or that. I mean, that for me, it's abundantly clear. I don't think soy is necessarily unique in that regard. There are many other things that get bucketed into that as well. But I guess for some, in some ways, you know, soy could be an easy target. And my broad view on it is that, you know, like no one needs to eat soy to live a happy and healthy life unless they love it and they can't live without it. Okay, that's just like that's a legit thing. But no one needs to eat soy, just like no one needs to drink green tea or eat blueberries, right? But to say that these things don't have benefits and measurable benefits for certain people in certain ways is just scientifically and factually incorrect. So I think, you know, all of the above are true.
I had a patient literally this morning. So like what, like 8 hours ago, she was asking me, she's like, I'm so confused. I see these videos about like dairy being bad for you, but then other videos about like soy milk, almond milk, those all being bad for you. So like what milk do I choose? We talked about that for like a good 20 minutes because it is true.
Yeah.
Like almost any food you can look up online, you'll see some influencer or whoever finding a reason to demonize it. And so I think it's more beneficial to talk about like what are the potential positives of blueberries, soy, dairy milk, whatever it is, which is a great segue into our next question for you. So people may or may not know that soy is a protein source. And in the era of high protein diets, I think it's a great thing to turn to. Would you say that soy is a pretty high quality protein source?
Yeah, I think it absolutely is. And it's interesting that you bring that up because I do work with a significant number of vegans and vegetarians, and it's almost always the case that soy for them is not playing a big enough role. Right now, this is anecdotal. Of course, I'm talking about my clients and my experiences, but it's very common for me to see a vegan or vegetarian not fully appreciating the role of soy, potentially, you know, lack of knowledge, which is fair enough. I mean, they're not the nutrition experts, but also they could also be influenced by some of these things that, you know, people do discuss. I think people do throw buzzwords around soy, like with hormones and stuff like that, even though, you know, we'll talk about that again, but you know, I think that's what scares people to a certain extent. I think that aspect of it. But yeah, soy is a high quality protein source. I mean, again, it's anecdotal, but at this point in time, there are so many vegan athletes and bodybuilders, and you know, their muscles have not evaporated, and they're almost inevitably relying on moderate to high amounts of soy, you know, as part of their routine. So whether if objectively it has a slightly lower rating compared to other protein sources, that doesn't dictate its overall ability to build and maintain muscle. And that's the most important thing. You know what I mean? You could rate different things in different ways, but the final product is what matters the most.
That is very true. Like there are, I feel like over the past, what was the big documentary on Netflix that came out that really was like,
The
well,
forks
there's
over
been a lot.
knives,
It might have been that one that
or what
like
the health.
it might have been
What the
What the
health, probably.
Health, I think, where it like really like set a lot of athletes down the like vegetarian, vegan streamline, and like people think of like athletes as like the most elite physical form you can be in, and like they are a lot of them are relying on soy, and they are very muscular and like competing well in their sport. So it is something good to reflect on.
Yeah, like it's important for people to know that at a basic level. I mean, that argument can only take you so far, but I mean, it's just so abundantly clear from those examples alone that soy obviously, has muscle building and muscle maintaining capabilities. So that's not really, and I don't think I mean, look, I don't know what kind of funny stuff people are saying these days, to be honest, because I pretty much I focus on what I do. But I'm sure there's some interesting characters saying that soy is going to affect your gains, this and that. And unfortunately, I mean, that's nonsense to the level that if someone's buying into that, it's almost like they're not ready. They're not ready to be exposed to different information. And, that's not really a target for intervention, in terms of like what we do and the information we share. Some people are not ready for that. And I think if someone is really buying into that type of content, that's where they're at. Cool. Fair enough. Right. We can't do it all. You can't influence every single person at every single moment.
It's a good perspective.
Yeah.
We've slowly made that shift ourselves, being sort of baby dietitians. We're getting older as the years go by, of course, but at first we felt, or at least I'll speak for myself. Emily, I'm sure you agree, but I felt this like urge to like fight all the commenters and say, no, you're wrong. Let's say soy is a high quality protein, but you're totally right. Like if they're not in the mindset to like even receive that seed being planted, it's not worth even arguing about.
No.
Yep.
Well, oh yeah, I was gonna say, along with the protein,
yeah,
I'm sure soy has other benefits. Lay them out for us.
Yes. Yeah, and then that's the piece of writing and research I did today. It was like if we think like who is soy going to really tangibly benefit. So if you have someone like if they don't look at it as a protein source in the sense that maybe they don't need more protein or they don't want to diversify their protein take, what else might compel them to eat soy? Some of the most obvious factors would be, if you're talking about menopause life stage, hot flashes. I mean, soy has isoflavones, which are like the flavonoid compounds in soy. Pretty good evidence that they help with certain menopausal symptoms. They reduce the severity, intensity of hot flashes. It's not 100% conclusive, but the evidence is pretty good in that area. That's a pretty big demographic, right? And by the way, we're talking, and we can talk quantities, but we're not talking turning your life upside down, becoming a vegan here. We're talking about, cooking with tofu a couple times a week, maybe getting, I have an edamame. Give me one moment here. I have an edamame snack that I really like. Like, this half a bag of this has 20 grams of protein and 8 grams of fiber, right? We're talking about like very modest amounts to get these benefits. So I'd say that's one. Anyone who has a goal to reduce cholesterol, right? Cholesterol lowering medication is most frequently prescribed in North America. So for anyone out there who, I mean, not to say that, obviously pharmaceuticals have a role to play, but for anyone out there who's trying to aggressively reduce their cholesterol, 25 grams of soy protein a day can lower it by about 5% over time, right? And that could be half a brick of tofu, which by the way is very economical as well in the context of like, rising food prices and other factors like that. So those would be the two like really ironclad ones where it's like there's real tangible evidence that you have this problem and there's this solution. Soy also can help a little bit from the evidence I've seen, maybe lower triglycerides a little bit, maybe raise HDL, which is the good cholesterol a little bit, because soy protein has a unique effect on fat metabolism, which is why it helps with fatty liver and stuff like that. And we can talk about that too. But those would be like the really compelling arguments I can make. And people at that life stage are probably the most open to feedback and teaching too. So it kind of works out really well. If a 20-something doesn't want to eat soy because their bodybuilding friends tell them it's going to, lower their testosterone, it's going to be tough. Like, first of all, that person, like, they might not need convincing right now. They're probably going to be okay. And second of all, they're not really going to probably be convinced anyway. So it's like, it's one of those things, kind of all good.
Yeah.
Yeah. I'm glad you also brought up like meeting people where they're at and like where they are in life, because that's something very important to think about, because you got to individualize it to them. And that's why working with a dietitian is great. Specifically for that, not to toot our own horns for anything.
No, 100%.
You brought up the testosterone. I know I'm jumping ahead a little bit, but you brought up the testosterone, and that's like, I feel like one of the things I hear all the time. I don't even know why I hear about it. I work in dialysis. I'm like, why are we talking about this? But they bring up like, there's the myth around like breast cancer and lowering testosterone levels. What can you speak on about soy related to that?
Yeah, well, I think, you're not going to find, I have a very interesting point to make on this, right? You're not going to find any human evidence where you demonstrate that someone eats a certain amount of soy and their testosterone levels. So let's talk about, in this case, like, many certain amount of soy, their testosterone level goes down, or that soy intake is correlated with testosterone levels. That doesn't exist because that influence doesn't exist, right? But I'm going to present an alternate way to look at it. Okay, so if you think about male testosterone levels, there's something called the fatty liver index. Okay, and that's a calculation using certain parameters, including triglycerides and liver enzymes, and it pretty much predicts how bad someone's fatty liver is without any imaging tests. And what I've seen in the research is that that's actually the number one predictor of low testosterone, is if your fatty liver index is high. So what we know is, on the other side, is that people who eat more soy foods, we're talking a few servings a week. Again, it's very important to make that clear. We're not talking you have to give up your steak, or like you have to give up all these things you love. We're talking about cooking with tofu once in a while, right? That's really what it is. Or maybe considering switching to soy milk instead of some almond milk or oat milk or whatever, right? People who eat a little bit more soy have a slightly lower risk of fatty liver. So technically speaking, soy is going to protect you from fatty liver, and in doing so is actually going to protect your testosterone levels as a result, because again, fatty liver index, from what I've seen, is the strongest predictor of low testosterone. So that's like a different way to look at it. Again, that's not going to convince a 20-something person to look at soy differently. But if someone has a fatty liver, or they're seeing their blood markers go up, and they're kind of like, okay, what I've been doing isn't working, that's where that messaging maybe can hit a little bit, right? And then, in regards to soy and breast cancer risk, again, I think the evidence there is pretty much as follows. Soy has a neutral at worst effect, and maybe soy intake has a small protective effect against certain types of cancers, but that's not revolutionary either way, right? Which is why I started the conversation by saying is that, nobody needs to eat soy if they don't want to. But for the right person at the right time, it has obvious benefits. So it's not like, I'm not trying to push the message that it's all soy all the time, or there's some significant massive cost to your health, but there's obvious benefits to be had if you have it. So hopefully that captured it well, but feel free to share insights or ask me follow-up questions too.
Yeah, those are all great points to make. And I love how you clarified. Again, it's like, it's not all soy all the time. I am curious to learn more about the fatty liver side of things. So you mentioned, this is getting probably a little nitpicky, but like with the soy milk, is it the soy, like the proteins in the soy specifically, or is it like any kind of like fiber or things like that that maybe you wouldn't be getting in like a soy milk versus like edamame, for example?
Yeah, so I mean, soy has two things about it that make it unique, right? That make it distinguished from any other food. The first is soy protein, and the second are the flavonoids, isoflavones. And generally, it's one or both of these things that's having the benefit, right? And some studies use just soy protein, some studies use isoflavones, and in like supplemental form. But the reality is, like, soy out in the wild has both. So for the average person who's just like thinking about this stuff, you don't really need to separate them. And scientists don't always know which component is giving the benefit. It's kind of like one or the other, or both combined, right? But just like, again, I brought up green tea earlier. Just like green tea, only green tea has green tea polyphenols. You can live a great life and never have green tea polyphenols, but they have some benefit. They're anti-inflammatory. They can influence your gut bacteria and so on, right? Same with soy. Again, soy protein isoflavones, you don't need them, but they have a metabolic benefit if you do expose yourself to them. And, beyond that, it's up to you.
That's interesting. So would most soy products that the average person is eating have most of those components in them?
Yes, pretty much all soy products to varying extents, right? Especially we talk tofu, tempeh, edamame, soy milk, they all have soy protein and they all have isoflavones, and the content will vary depending on the exact product, but it's present across the board.
Interesting. Huh.
I'd like never
I'm not
heard anything
super
about,
big into fatty liver like research at all. So it's always interesting to learn more
Same.
about that. I guess along those same lines, we've talked about some other various benefits. Are there any that we missed? Like any benefits for men, women, that eating soy can provide?
Yeah, I mean, I think the other benefit it offers, like realistically, I mean, yeah, soy is amongst protein sources, soy is unique, right? So even beyond isoflavones and soy protein, if you think of red meat, fish, and then soy, each of these families of foods has something unique about it, right? Fish is the only thing that has a large amount of vitamin D and omega-3. Red meat obviously has a large amount of iron. that has creatine, carnitine, other compounds. Soy has a lot of polyphenols. Okay, polyphenols we see time and time again associated with very good metabolic health benefits, better insulin resistance, lower markers of inflammation. Those are the two big ones. Potentially lowers triglycerides as well. So polyphenols are just a group of plant-based compounds. They're found in plant-based foods, soy being one. So increases your polyphenol intake, which is a good thing. And then soy is going to have magnesium. It's going to have, depending on the product, tofu or soy milk is going to have calcium. There's going to be potassium there, right? These are minerals that people don't consume a lot of. I mean, edamame has an incredible amount of folate, which is useful at specific life stages for women as well, right? So, and again, some of those compounds are not as abundant in some of the other protein sources, right? So that's why for me, my philosophy is for someone who enjoys all protein sources, the most reasonable approach is to get variety amongst them because you tap into all of their benefits. And yeah, those are some of soy's, those are some of soy's unique benefits.
That's really what it all boils down to with all foods. It's just like moderation, variety. I know it's so cliche to say those things at this point, but it's true. Like you're not going to feel good eating blueberries 24/7, but there are tons of benefits of eating blueberries. And the same thing goes for soy. I'm glad you've like really driven that home because I think people need to hear that versus either like so far anti-soy or so far like all soy all the time. It's nice to like discuss the middle ground, which is sometimes annoying for a listener. They want to like know exactly what to eat and everything, but food doesn't work like that. There is that gray middle ground, and variety is what matters the most.
Yeah, well, I'm gonna present it a different way that just came to my mind, right? So let's just say someone has their protein intake, and let's say 80% of it comes from beef, let's say, or let's just say if exercise routine. I'm gonna do good examples in parallel, and 80% of their exercise routine is running. Okay, so that extra 10, so let's just say, and they have 10% they can work with. Well, like if that 10%, like there's going to be diminishing returns on running more, eating more beef. Why not tap into the unique benefits of yoga or the unique benefits of fish or soy, right? Because once you have something to a certain point, again, like the benefits no longer novel to your body. You're kind of getting redundancy in your nutrient intake, right? So I think that's a reasonable way to look at it as well.
That's very true. Like you can only eat so much iron before your body is like, no, I'm good. And so why not see what else you can give your body from other food sources?
Yeah. 100%.
Love it.
I think the only other thing that we might have missed that I want to bring up is the anti like GMO crowd. Because I feel like that always gets brought in some way or another. So one, is soy a GMO crop? And then if so, is it bad for us because of the GMOs?
Yeah, no, it's a good question, one that I used to touch on a lot, and so I just kind of got bored on touching on it. Funny enough. But yeah, I mean, so from everything I've seen, I think the following is true. Okay. The most soy that's grown is actually used to feed animals. And that soy very often is genetically modified, but it's being fed to the animals that then subsequently people are eating, right? The soy, and I know this to be true in Canada specifically, a lot of the tofu, the soy milk products, the edamame products that I encounter in Canada specifically are organic, which means they are non-GMO. Now, so for whatever solace that provides someone, then they should know that. I mean, they will, and again, I'm talking about the Canadian market specifically. I mean, I'm not an expert on the American market. And maybe you guys can tell me if a lot of the tofu or soy milk you see is organic or not, but it's certainly the case that it is in Canada. So in the Canadian context, the soy that you're probably going to be eating and buying at the grocery store is actually going to be organic. And that's simple as that. But yes, and again, I say like people are not like, I'm an omnivore, right? So it's not like I'm guiltless in this, but people, they're not tearing down the rainforest in the Amazon to make more tofu, right? They might be tearing it down to grow soy, but that soy is being fed to the cattle, and that's just objectively true, right? There's no feelings involved in that. That's just the reality of it. So I think if that's something that people are caught up on, I think they should know that that's the reality. As far as I'm aware, if you guys know differently, please tell me.
Yeah, Emily, you're more of a tofu eater than I am. Is the tofu you buy or encounter organic usually?
I don't know.
I was gonna say, can you like envision the label?
I get my tofu from Costco, and it's a green label. I could probably look it up right now. Actually, talk about something else and I'll
Okay.
figure
Yeah.
this out.
Look it up right now because I'm definitely fascinated. And I'll be honest, let me add to that point, right? That anything we've talked about in terms of the value of soy, its nutritional value, isoflavones, the mineral content, the polyphenols, the soy protein, none of that changes whether it's GMO or not.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, it's it's the same as blueberries. You know, even if you want to make some sort of, even if someone has it ingrained in their mind that organic is better, let's just say, right? And that's just like, we have to accept that position. The gap between, and let's use blueberries, right? The gap between no blueberries and any blueberries is massive. The gap between conventional blueberries and organic blueberries, even if it exists and we want to accept for the sake of this conversation, it does, it's a much smaller gap, right? And the same would go for soy.
Yeah, that's the point I wanted to drive home too, is like, if and when the soy you're eating is coming from a GMO crop, you're still getting all the benefits that soy is going to provide, whether it's a GMO crop or not. Emily, what did you discover?
I discovered mine is apparently organic.
Interesting.
There you go.
I
There you
just
go.
had no idea.
Yeah.
I think it's the only tofu my Costco offers anyway. So I'm like, this'll do.
Add to cart.
Yeah.
I think they know. I think the I mean, these companies know that there's already, people have an unjustified, of course, in my opinion, our opinion, maybe distrust of soy. So they're not trying to give any more reason to do that. And so they're ensuring that, hey, listen, what we're going to put on shelves here is going to be, organic. And, that's a smart play on their front because they are working against, they're working against a lot of misunderstanding, a lot of public misunderstanding.
Mm-hmm.
And it's tough. It's a tough one, right?
Tough day to be a soybean.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, I think those are all of our like main controversies. Are there any that we missed? Are there any that you hear all the time that you feel very passionate about debunking before we wrap this up?
So the only other thing I'll say is that, in regards to the hormone aspect, or like soy is like an estrogen or whatever the case may be.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I read in a scientific journal that scientists deem soy phytoestrogens to have 1/200th of the receptor binding capacity of actual estrogen. So they have a very fractional influence on that aspect of things, which is exactly why, in the context of like, a person, soy does not influence hormone levels. In the context of perhaps menopause, where there's decreases and changes in hormone levels and there's more vulnerability there, maybe you get some modest benefit, right? So again, I'll throw that out there as well, because that's a stat that I encountered, in the course of my kind of research several years ago.
I'm glad you mentioned that. That's the thing I hear a lot too, is the whole estrogen and soy coupling. So it's worth clarifying. I'm glad you mentioned that. Well, I think that's all of our main questions for the day. We're going to talk about in our bonus question, the tastiest plant protein. May or may not be soy. You'll have to tune in to find out. But Andy, before we let you go, let our listeners know where they can find you if they want to learn more.
Yeah. Well, Andy the RD on Instagram, and now on TikTok too. I've been loving the TikTok life, but actually been very fruitful for me, and I kind of like how you can just talk longer on there than reels. So that's a great time. But yeah, I've written so much stuff over the last 10 years that if someone wants to know my opinion on something, if they just type in like Andy the RD in the topic, like somewhere that I've written it on Google will probably come up. Hopefully. Don't type in just Andy though, because Andrew Huberman's gonna come up, so like we don't want...
That's unfortunate.
Make sure that Andy I don't really listen. I don't really have any opinion on him. I think I said earlier, I kind of I do my own thing. I don't really take in too much other stuff besides my own research, but yeah, just wanted to throw that joke in there. But yeah, that's it.
That's too funny. Well, we'll link it all below, of course, the true links for Andy the Kale Lord, not Andy Huberman. So if you want to learn more, go to our show notes below.
Amazing. Well, thank you, Andy, for coming on again. This has been so fun. You're not leaving us yet because we still have our bonus question, but it has been a pleasure. I don't know if we've talked about soy. Like it's been we're 150 episodes in and we still haven't talked about soy. So it was a matter of time, and we're glad you're able to chat about it.
My pleasure. And just bring me back for fatty liver soon, because I could talk about that.
Perfect. Deal.
10 times as much.
Deal.
Consider it scheduled already.
Yes, season 10.
Yeah.
All right. We'll see you guys next week.
Bye, guys.